Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, what is up? What is good? The King of Lightning here today, bringing you guys and gals Kingdom chapter 518 and 519 review slash discussion. I will be doing an earnest, honest review of the next chapter, Kingdom. But for these two chapters, I do want to focus mainly on just the discussion part, and then I'll go over my rating for the chapters. But in a sense, chapter 518 is the Ryuyu army with Hosan Ryu and Yotanwa. In chapter 517, it was actually a translation error on the part of turnip farmers, where Shunchuiju, he is not the deputy of the Ryu army. He is the commander. He is replacing Hosan Ryu to lead 90,000 plus soldiers. But on top of that, you have the armies that are in the Ryu city itself that Hosan Ryu is going to utilize for this battle, obviously. Considering how in chapter 518, Yotanwa and the mountain tribes absolutely crushed the Danai, the quote-unquote Feint. They were already spanking. In came the main force, the Manai. I mean, it was a clean sweep. It was like, oh my god. The mountain tribes are far more powerful than Hosan Ryu gave him credit for, so he's gonna need those men coming from the city of Ryuyu. That's number one. Number two, chapter 519 is the Atsuya army, and this one hasn't started yet, but the battlegrounds have been set, and Moten and the Gakuka, oh no! He's going up against Kisui. Like, this dude is genius level. I won't say that he's as smart as Riboku, but the guy is known for his military prowess. Granted, he was thwarted by Kanki, but it's Kanki. Like, what do you do? Most cats get thwarted by Kanki. And speaking of Kanki, chapter 519 also shows us what's going on with Kanki and the city of Gyu as well. But like Moten, let me just start with Moten, like the main stuff that was going on in chapter 519 and towards the end of the chapter. Moten hasn't gotten that much spotlight at all. In fact, the last time he got some serious spotlight was during the Kodoshun arc. Shin and company, they're the Haishin unit, they're the main characters. Of course, they get most of the spotlight. Number two, Ohon got a lot of spotlight when it came to the Wayfire Dragons. He beat what's his face, Earl Shi or something like that, like one of the best spearmen in China. He beat him in combat. Ohon should have been general. The plan to beat the Wayfire Dragons was formulated by Ohon, and he beat one of the Wayfire Dragons themselves. Ohon should have already been general. Plain and simple. You have that going for Ohon. A lot of stuff there. Moten, again, has not had that much at all. But apparently for this great big battle, the battle that will decide the fate of both countries, of both Zhao and Quinn, it is going to be Moten to kick off. Moten and the Gakuka, they're going to kick off this insane battle. They're going to go up against 30,000. 5,000 versus 30,000. I don't see Moten outsmarting Kisui. I just don't see it. But Osen is outsmarting everybody because he's that amazing. My guess here is that there's a plan that Osen told Moten, and Moten is going to follow that plan. I'm just trying to figure out what on earth could Moten and 5,000 possibly do against Kisui. And it's not just Kisui too, it's also that one big guy. I think his name is Bato, I think it is. Like, this dude is a serious force of nature, man. He reminds me of Daimon of the Fire Dragons. He's just big, he just cleaves like 18 guys in one go. It's like, dude, no one, as far as you know, no one in Moten's unit can match that guy, let alone having to deal with Kisui's military prowess as a strategist. Like, I don't see it. It's crazy. All the signs point to Moten not only losing, but dying and getting crushed. My guess here is that at some point, the Haishin unit is going to divert to the left of the Quinn army side and help out Moten. That's my guess. Because right now, the Haishin unit is behind Osen's main army. Are the Haishin unit really just going to stay there? At some point, reinforcements have to go to Moten. Unless the terrain, because it was stated in the chapter that this area, the Shukai or the Scarlet Sea Plains, they have a history behind them. And Osen, he may have put Moten in a position where the terrain favors him. So the 5,000 men of Moten's army can actually hold down and hunker down against the 30,000 men of the Kisui army. that is possible. So the terrain may play, and honestly probably will play a huge factor in this. When they were talking about the Scarlet Sea Plains, it was mentioned how there are these pockets of forest that make it very hard for armies to maneuver. I'm not too sure. The Moten may be located in one of those forest pockets, which means that Kisui and his men are gonna have a hard time penetrating Moten's forces because they can only send so many men through that certain pocket at a time. And mind you, for the most part, Quinn is on the defensive. However, Yotawa, Yotawa, screw defense. The best defense is offense. When it comes to the Atsuya army, not necessarily beating Kisui and his men is going to be a factor when it comes to Moten's unit. It should be more so stalling out for X amount of days because they need to make sure that you run out of resources and they starve, and that allows Kanki's army to then penetrate and then take control of Gyu. Moving on from there, Kanki and his forces. Kanki and his men, they have a system in place where you have a few thousand guys guarding the city of Gyu itself, the actual gates, and then you have the rest of the army spread out around the entire city to deal with oncoming Zhao forces. Normally they come in the pockets of 2,000 to 3,000 Zhao men. Most of them so far have been foot soldiers. So Kanki and Maron, they're dealing with this so far so well. Right now, the Ringyoku cavalry of the Kanki army is just devastating most of the Zhao forces. Raido and company are dealing with, I think, 3,000 Zhao soldiers. However, another 2,000 Zhao soldiers are coming in from both the right and the left-hand side of where Raido's fighting. Now on top of that, from like a forest area and like the left-hand side of Gyu, there's another cavalry force of Zhao coming on the way. The problem here is that because they have to fend off invaders from like all sides, they have to spread out the Kanki army fairly thin, enough to guard the city gates and enough to deal with these oncoming forces. So essentially speaking, it started off pretty good, but then things got rough really quick. Now, finally, we go over to the previous chapter, chapter 518. And in this chapter, the focus here is clearly the Ryuyu army of Kosan-ryu and the Mountain Tribe army of Yotanwa. The Ryuyu army have had skirmishes with Yotanwa's army, and according to some of the head lieutenants of the Ryuyu army, they've gotten their butts kicked. But it's still relatively unknown as to how powerful the mountain tribes are. Because when they liberated Sai from their predicament, it was in an instant. Like, it was literally like maybe like a few minutes. Like, they swooped in there, they killed a whole bunch of Zhao. Riboku had no choice but to retreat. So when it comes to the details of how powerful they are, unknown. Now, currently, the commander is Kosan-ryu, but Shunshin-ju is on his way, and he'll be there in half a day's time. However, Yotanwa, after hearing what's going on from a soldier, the 50,000 current mountain tribes, plus the extra 10,000 that Heiki Bro was bringing, so 60,000 total Quinn soldiers, they have to stall and make sure that they are not allowed, meaning the Ryu army are not allowed anywhere near Gyu. So obviously the assumption here would be defense, very strong defense. However, Yotanwa, no fucks given. So before we even start the battle between the Ryuyu army and the mountain tribes, we get some dialogue between Bajio and the king of the Figo tribe. Apparently, they've had some history with, I think maybe like Bajio specifically. As Bajio, when he was younger, he was rampaging across the mountain tribe areas. But the king of the Figo tribe does state how it was pretty ironic that him and his tribe would be standing alongside him or them, one of those two, meaning them, the mountain tribes of Yotanwa, or him, Bajio himself, and his men, whatever it is. Either way, what's important here is that he explains that the main reason why a lot of these kings of mountain tribes across the western side of Quinn follow Yotanwa is ultimately because Yotanwa is such a powerful woman. And in the hopes of betting, I love that, I need to use that more often. In the hopes of betting Yotanwa, they all follow her and hope to attain a lot of achievements, so these achievements will make her fall in love with them. According to the guy with the hawk on his shoulder, that's the main motivation. It is sugar walls. Now, listen, like I'm not saying that Yotanwa is a bad-looking woman. I mean, she looks fantastic, but to go off and die in droves, granted, they are strong, and so their military might is ferocious. Kosan-ryu sees that when they have the Manai come in there after the Danai. Like, the Danai was already powerful and scary. The Manai just blew through Zhao lines. Again, powerful people, but the main motivation is sugar walls. So that, I find it to be a little bit ridiculous, but according to the king of the Figo tribe, that's how it is. So ultimately speaking, when it comes to these chapters of Kingdom, the first chapter, when it comes to story progression, you do have the start of the battle itself between the Ryuyu army and the mountain tribes. the Yotanwa army. Now, Heiki hasn't arrived there yet, neither has Suntriju. So we're seeing the core armies fight at this current point in time. The core Mountain Tribe army and the core Yu army. And right now, the Mountain Tribes are slaughtering. So by the time Suntriju does arrive at the battlefield, they may have lost 20,000 men. Straight up. And that is the main thing for story. When it comes to character, it speaks more so for the Mountain Tribe kings as opposed to Yotanwa herself. So we see where their motivation lies for the most part, maybe. Can't confirm that because there hasn't been like a king's discussion among the Mountain Tribes and they all came to a consensus that, yeah, we just want some sugar walls. Then also for character, we have Kosanryu. He hears that Shunriju is going to take over as commander of the Ryu army, and he seems to be relatively calm, cool, and collected about it, like not really a big deal. He's just following Riboku's orders. So it shows you that his loyalty is to the point where he won't even be upset about him losing his commander role of over 100,000 men, ultimately. Fine for character, once again, we have Shun Shuiju, and apparently he is an orphan of the North, according to Kosanryu. What exactly is going on there? Not too sure, but when they say orphan of the North, I'm going to guess that this pertains to the mountain tribes of the North in Zhao, because I believe that Zhao does have mountain tribes in the North. That's my guess. Or it could be from a city. Like there was a northern city of Zhao that was ransacked, that was destroyed by X, Y, and Z, and Suntriju came from that city. And Iboku took pity on him and took him in. I don't know, who knows? But apparently he is a quote-unquote orphan from the North. What that means, we'll find out in more detail. But if it is Mountain Tribe related, then Suntriju may actually be a very good opponent against Yotanwa. Because as someone who was born and raised as a Mountain Tribe kid, he may have greater insight as to the customs, as to how the Mountain Tribes would operate on the battlefield, as opposed to Kosanryu. Which would be the main reason why Riboku would send Suntriju to lead the army as opposed to have Kosanryu stay there and lead the army. Possibly. So again, we'll find out more about that in the upcoming chapters. And that's it for chapter 518. Overall, this chapter I thought was a good chapter of Kingdom. Now moving on to chapter 519. When it comes to character, because we've already covered the overall pacing and the structure at the beginning of the video, because again, this chapter is predominantly focused on the Atsuyo and the Osen army, and then the previous chapter on the Ryuyu and the Yotanwa army. Though in this chapter, we also shift over to Kanki as well for a few pages. So this chapter, from a pacing and structure standpoint, has two main points to it, whereas the previous chapter, chapter 518, has one main point to it. But ultimately, the main focus is the setup of the battle between the Riboku Atsuyo army and the Osen army. Now, when it comes to the story progression of chapter 519, when it comes to the Kanki army, see what's going on there. It's relatively simple for the most part, but they are being pressured because of dealing with all of these small pocket forces that are coming from almost every direction. Number two for story, obviously, is going to be the battleground for the Osen army versus the Atsuyo army led by Riboku. And that was played out at the beginning of the chapter, where you have Osen and you have Riboku. They have arrived at the Scarlet Sea Plains. They're analyzing the environment. They're imagining their forces and where they'll be placed and how the fight will take place and so on and so forth. So that is the main thing for the second part of the story progression, just the setup of this battle. Number three for story, the fact that the Gakuka unit are going to be the ones to set it off. 5,000 men of the Gakuka unit, led by Moten, are going to be fighting against the 30,000 men of the Kisui army, of the men of Raigen. Men of Raigen, which is, okay, that's interesting. And you have to wonder, is there something, I mean, there has to be, but is there something particular about this battle that may give the Gakuka unit some advantage? Because they clearly have no advantage in numbers. That is obvious. What is gonna happen here? It's not pointing in Moten's favor. It really isn't. But he seems to be fairly confident, or at least not, maybe not confident, but he's cool with it. Like when Shin looks at Moten and Moten's looking at the board and seeing where he's positioned, he says right then and there, understood. And this surprises Shin. So for characterization, we can throw in Moten for this chapter. When it comes to characters like Osen, when it comes to Riboku, when it comes to Kanki, Maron, not really anything there. But when it comes to specifically Moten, because Moten didn't really break a sweat seeing how his 5,000 men were up against the 30,000 men of Reigen, that clearly shows that he has reached a certain level of intelligence and confidence when it comes to his position as a 5,000 man commander. I was gonna say 4,000, but no, he's 5,000 now. So when it comes to the chapter rating of chapter 519, I'm gonna say that is a good plus to great chapter, and that's it. Be sure to, of course, rate the video. It is not that hard to do when you have a device called ZMouse. You use ZMouse to click, rate the video, to subscribe, of course, and as well, click on the bell to join the squad, and comment in the comment section down below. Peace and have a nice goddamn day.